Or shot fire, officer down, shot fire, officer down. Got a city officer down, shot fire.
223, be advised, we have a visual on enemy paratroopers at grid Papa uniforms.
Welcome to the Resilient Warrior Nation, a podcast dedicated to inspiring hope and healing for first responders, military veterans, and anyone facing PTSD and trauma. Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Resilient Warrior Nation podcast. I'm your host, Mike Morgan, and today I am extremely pumped. We have a very special guest, another American hero, as far as I'm concerned, and I don't think you would hear an argument from anyone. His name is Lieutenant Kegan Smurf Gill, and let me read you Kegan's bio. Lieutenant Kegan Smurf Gill, U.S. Navy retired, is a former Navy A-18E Super Hornet pilot, known for surviving the fastest ejection in naval aviation history at 695 miles an hour. Despite sustaining severe injuries, multiple surgeries, and battling PTSD and a traumatic brain injury, Kegan's journey to recovery has been extraordinary. Through holistic therapies, including psychedelic-assisted therapies, he achieved profound healing. Now a motivational speaker, author, and family man, Kegan shares his story of resilience, inspiring others to overcome their own challenges. His upcoming memoir, Phoenix Revival, The Aftermath of Naval Aviation's Fastest Survived Ejection, will be released January 21st, 2025. Pre-order now on Amazon. Kegan, I'd like to welcome you to the Resilient Warrior Nation podcast. It is my honor to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here and share my story with. We talked just before we started recording how we're sharing these stories, and it's going to help lift other people up, even if it's just one other guy that hears this, one other gal that's going through their own dark journey right now. It might be that little spark of hope they need. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And like you said, it doesn't sound like a lot, but literally think about changing one person's life today. It is incredible. The power, because not only are you changing his life, you're changing the life of everyone attached to him, family, friends, co-workers. It's just like a crack in a windshield. It just spider webs, and from there on, he may be doing the same thing. So,
absolutely.
Again, I thank you so much for unveiling and becoming your most vulnerable. So,
of course,
that is bravery in and of itself, in addition to everything you've done in your life. So, I want to thank you again. So,
it's my pleasure.
Please tell the audience about you. Where were you born and raised? Childhood?
Yeah, I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Pretty shortly thereafter, moved to Alamosa, Colorado, in the Southern Rockies. And my mom, she was going through med school, doing her residency, and then she did a program through the National Health Service, which basically she had to go serve in an area of need of a physician. So that's what brought us to Oklahoma, and then later Colorado. Is she basically served, I think, 3 or 4 years there, and then that covered her med school. So I grew up in the San Luis Valley, which is a just beautiful area, blue skies, big mountain backdrop, and I grew up going down these freaking crazy runs at Wolf Creek Ski Area in the deep powder. Just loving the outdoors. Before I could even walk, my dad had me on his back in a little backpack out backcountry skiing, telemark skiing, hiking. And so I kind of grew up in the outdoors and got a real love for freedom and nature and the big blue sky as a young kid. When I was 7 years old, we moved to northern Michigan, and that's kind of back where both my parents had grown up. And traded the mountains for the woods and the streams and the lakes, the Great Lakes, and grew up hunting and fishing and backpacking and just being a little hellion out in the woods, lighting shit on fire, shooting stuff. I think where most little boys should probably be. It's a pretty healthy place. As I grew up, I didn't really know what I wanted to do as I came out of high school. I did fine in high school. I didn't stand out academically as a real stud, but I played 3 sports. I was doing good in my grades. I just didn't really have any direction or anything calling to me. But there was this little flight school in northern Michigan called Northwestern Michigan College, and they had a flight program that at the time was still pretty inexpensive. Now, I mean, to do flight training has gotten absurd, but back then it wasn't too bad, and so I started going to it, thinking, "Oh, this might be cool." And by the time I was, I guess, a junior in college, I was a flight instructor. I got my private, instrument, commercial, CFI, CFII, my multi, and I started building hours as a flight instructor. I got to be the aerobatics instructor in this little Cessna 152 Aerobat we had, and I would just take people up. And I got that job because I was the smallest dude at the time. I was racing triathlons. I was a pretty short stature guy. I was at like 130 pounds. I'm a good 35 pounds more than that now, but at the time, I was the perfect guy for the job because this little airplane, it didn't have much room for payload. So I could take a guy like your size up and go flying, and we'd still be within weight and balance of that thing. But did that, got hired as a corporate pilot for right out of college. One of my students actually ended up buying his own aircraft and wanted me to help fly for his company. Nice. So spend the next year flying all over the country in a super nice little general aviation aircraft called a Mooney Acclaim, glass avionics, integrated autopilot, leather, fine stitching. I mean, the inside of this thing looked like a Ferrari or something.
Nice.
And I enjoyed that for the year. Got to see all over the country, got to do a lot of single pilot flying, building flight experience, making my own decisions. And then I had a friend who was actually applying to go to Navy OCS as a pilot. And at the time I was like, God, doesn't your dad have to be an admiral? Don't you have to go to the Naval Academy? I just had no idea what it took to fly for the military. I thought like, oh, these guys have got to be superheroes. But my buddy Mark's like, no, man, you have flight experience, you have a 4-year degree. You don't even need flight experience. All you need is a 4-year degree, and you can apply to OCS and go fly for the military. So I put in a package, it got picked up, went through Navy OCS, which, just Marine drill instructors yelling at you, making you do push-ups, run around, memorize a bunch of crap. 3 months of that, good time.
So just so people don't know, OCS is Officer Candidate School, right?
Officer Candidate School, yeah.
So if you have a degree, you're actually going as an officer, if you like.
Right. So you can either, in order to be a pilot in the Navy, at least, you have to be an officer. So you either have to go to the Naval Academy, go through ROTC, or go through OCS. So that's what I opted to do. And since I already have my degree, that worked out perfectly. Went through into aviation pre-flight indoctrination, which is sort of like ground school before you start flight training, and you just got to take a bunch of written tests, multiple choice tests. You do a little bit of survival training. You get to swim a mile in your flight suit and boots, and then they put you in a helo dunker that dumps you upside down. You get to do some kind of fun stuff in the pool, which I really enjoyed. Not everybody had as much fun getting tumbled around in the pool and having to swim around in their boots, but once I got through that, I went to primary flight training in Corpus Christi, Texas, and flew the T-34 Charlie Turbo Mentor, little turbine prop plane, fully aerobatic, sporty little thing, and did well there. I think my previous flight experience helped, at least during primary flight training in a lot of ways. Okay. There was also a lot I had to relearn to do things the Navy's way, which made it actually, I think, more challenging at times. But passed through that, did well in my class enough to select tailhook, and then headed to Kingsville, Texas, not too far from Corpus Christi where I was, and then started training in the T-45 Charlie Goshawk, little single-engine jet trainer that the Navy uses before you get into the real bigger aircraft. Okay. Again, did well in that training, well enough that I selected the strike syllabus after that, and continued another 6 months.
What is the strike syllabus?
So about halfway through intermediate training, before you begin advanced training, about 6 months into being in Kingsville, you get to select whether you want to go E2, C2, which are one's the early warning radar aircraft that fly off the carrier. They fly the twin prop aircraft called the E2 Hawkeye. They do sort of surveillance. They've got these, it's actually, I think, the most expensive aircraft in the Navy's arsenal. all the radar and avionics and everything on them. And you also have to be about the best damn stick and rudder pilot to fly those things, because you only have about 18 inches of clearance on either wingtip because it's such a big wingspan, and it's got pretty limited avionics. It's like a 1960s airframe. So the guys who fly those have to be really good stick and rudder pilots, but it wasn't the mission that I was that interested in. And so I put down to select F-18s, and I was fortunate. I selected that after a pretty thorough review board. You get to go in for like a one-on-one interview with a whole board of other seasoned pilots.
Okay.
And anyways, that went my way. I selected the F-18 community, and then completed another 6 months of the strike training, learning how to do some basic air-to-ground with bombing, a little bit of CAS, close air support, a little bit of air-to-air stuff, tactical formation, more of the stuff that you use once you get into the F-18 to build sort of a foundation. And completed that training and winged as a naval aviator May of 2012. And then I selected Super Hornets in Virginia Beach and headed to VFA 106 Gladiators in Virginia Beach and started the RAG, which was the most brutal of all the flight training. I mean,
oh, really?
You show up there, you got wings on your chest, you're like, I'm a real pilot now, but
yeah,
you very quickly get put in your place of you don't know much anything, and that's kind of how it is. It's like showing up at the NFL and you know how to run and jump and sprint, but you don't know how to play football yet.
Yeah.
And you're going to jump right in with the big boys, and it can be a harsh transition for sure. But another year of training there.
Is there a big attrition rate from that point, from when you start this training, the advance to you graduate?
There is
good.
For the way it seemed to flow was the most attrition was at the very beginning at OCS, and then a little bit less at API, and a little bit less at primary, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But the mesh that you are going through, this filter, gets tighter and tighter. So people do attrite all the way through, and it doesn't take much to fail out the whole way through. And every day, every flight, your career is on the line. If you screw this up, it might be your last chance at it. So it's high pressure all the way through, and you just kind of get used to being under the gun. And
okay.
But passed through, and was just happy to graduate. It was a brutal experience, but I selected VFA 143, the Pukin Dogs in Virginia Beach, Virginia, flying the F-18 Echo Super Hornet, so the single-seat Super Hornet. It was, it was a dream come true. I mean, walking out to these aircraft as, a young dude in my 20s in the flight suit and G suit and all this gear, and seeing this big old $89 million jet I'm about to go strap into, man, it was surreal.
I can't even imagine how you feel the first time you're flying solo after getting your wings and the training's over, and you've kind of arrived. I mean, obviously you're always evolving and getting better and better, but it's got to be the greatest feeling of satisfaction you've ever had in your life walking out there.
Yeah, and you don't get long to enjoy it, because then you really quickly realize, as you're the new guy in a fleet squadron, that, again, you don't know anything.
Yep.
and you just keep drinking from that fire hose and try not to screw anything up too bad. And I kind of felt a little bit of imposter syndrome being there. I'm like, I'm this community college kid. I wasn't like, a lot of these guys are like valedictorians and they were D1 athletes and captains of the, hockey team or whatever, and studs. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know if I belong here, but I'm just going to keep my head down. Hopefully nobody notices.
No,
and so,
right.
I adopted the, small mouth, big ears, just shut the fuck up and do my job.
Smart for an FNG.
Yeah. I was sure that applies to law enforcement as well, I bet.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. You have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Just sit there and absorb it.
Yeah. And that's kind of where my story gets crazy. I'd been in my first fleet squadron, the Pukin Dogs, for about 8 months, so not even a full year yet. I've been keeping my mouth shut. I hadn't really stood out in any way. There was about 4 or 5 newer guys that had joined after me, and most of those guys already got call signs. And it was January 15, 2014. I'm preparing to go out and do some air combat maneuvering or dogfighting which we typically call just BFM, basic fighter maneuvering, though.
Okay.
There's nothing that basic about it, really. It's kind of like they call BUDS, basic underwater, demolition or whatever. I'm screwing it up. I'm not a SEAL, but
That's it. Basic underwater survival, I think.
For whatever reason, the Navy likes to use the word basic when it's actually really difficult. And that goes for BFM as well. Anyways, it was a cold day in January. Checking the weather before the flight, it was below freezing air temps, windy, churned up sea swell, 37-degree Fahrenheit water temperature out at the buoy underneath the area I was about to go fly in. My squadron mate, Fisty, he was standing duty that day, which all the pilots would rotate through. And to keep spirits light in the squadron, he was always doing funny stuff. And that day he put up on the whiteboard behind him all the airspace that we were going to utilize out over the Atlantic Ocean that day in what's called the Whiskey 72. And it just so happened, using the Shark Tracker app that he had, he pinned all these positions of all these GPS tagged sharks that were out in the ocean in that area. And that day there was a 16-foot, 3,500-pound great white shark named Mary Lee directly underneath my airspace. And so he was joking, we're joking around, like, today would be a terrible day to eject. You've got below freezing air, churned up water, freezing water temperatures, and there's a freaking great white shark that wants to eat you out there. So we laugh about that. And as I'm about to walk on the flight, another more senior pilot in the squadron, Basil, comes up and he goes, "Hey man, you just haven't done anything dumb enough yet during a call sign." And I looked over at the other whiteboard in the ready room, and it's got all the other newer guys, and they've got like just a laundry list of all these funny call sign potentials, and a lot of them already had them assigned, but I didn't have anything hardly up there. There's like 3 throwaway ones up that were just not going to go anywhere. And so I walk on this flight, I get my gear on, my dry suit because it's freezing cold out, put on my dry suit, G-suit over that, my harness, my survival gear, and then I'm wearing the Jehemix helmet, which is like this big, super cool space helmet visor that wherever your head moves in the cockpit, the magnets in the cockpit will track your head position very precisely so that all of your weapons displays and flight information kind of track along with your gaze, so you don't have to be inside the cockpit.
Is that like the $400,000 helmet that they talk about?
Yeah, man, I'm not sure what they go for these days. I think at that time they're saying like $280,000. Wow. So they're like, whatever you do, don't drop this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And the visor's all custom cut to your head, so it's like, a lot of money goes into the investment in your training and the gear too.
I can imagine. Does it take like 2 days to fit your head to that or something like that? I heard. Is that true?
Yeah, it's a bit of a drawn out process. You got to go into the parachute riggers, the PRs, and they fit you for this visor, and they've got to mark it and cut it, and there's a little bit of trial and error to get this thing to fit you just right.
Okay.
And then every time you get in the aircraft, you calibrate it to the magnetic system in the aircraft. But super cool piece of gear once you get the hang of it. Anyways, took off, went out on this flight. Before we started the fight, we went out and actually did a little bit of air-to-air refueling to check this ARS refueling pod that had come out of maintenance. So you've probably seen it on the movies. You put out a little fuel probe on the nose of the aircraft, and you fly it behind another aircraft, and you plug into this little basket that's flying out there. And it's very delicate, precise movements as you smoothly bring it in and hold there in formation very close as you fuel up. All that went smooth. And with the extra fuel and airspace, my flight lead and I broke off, and we went to do some dogfighting, BFM, which was my absolute most favorite thing to do in the Super Hornet. We get to do a wide variety of cool mission sets, from close air support, which is probably what was most frequently used in the real world, in the global war on terror years that I was in service, for that 20 years of warfare.
Right.
There was a lot of CAS, close air support, integrating with the ground troops to bring in air support. So that was really our bread and butter, but we also did air-to-air tactics, BFM, dogfighting, electronic attack, and a number of other wide skill sets in the Super Hornet. So you're never bored, and at the end of the day, you always have to still be able to land on the aircraft carrier, which is really the most challenging thing we do and the most dangerous.
That's got to be incredible. I was talking to Ms. Buckley, our mutual friend,
Yeah.
his landings. I'm like, bro, it's like landing on a chiclet in the middle of the sea.
That's what it looks
I've
like.
seen like YouTube videos of you guys when you have cameras inside the cockpit and you could barely see it. And then we were talking about the speeds at which you guys land and the like almost immediate cessation. And I was like, that's got to be a concussive force concussive
Oh yeah.
forces every single time that you're taking off and landing. He's like, yeah, the flight surgeons don't really tell you that when you're in training.
Yeah, I think there's actually just I think a New York Times article that just came out talking about that very thing. Like, it doesn't take very much force in order to induce a traumatic brain injury. Doc Kurt Parsley, he's a former SEAL turned physician. He points out it's only like zero point 0.1 Gs of instantaneous force is enough to even disrupt the delicate physiology of your brain. It's just
Really?
like, it's so delicate. It's like soft butter. So those acceleration forces of launching off the aircraft, the deceleration forces of smashing into the aircraft, and then all the G's that you're under when you're ripping the thing around, performing the jet at its upper capabilities. Your brain is just squishing all over the place. So
I can imagine.
I'm sure there's a lot that's going to come out about how terrible that is for our brains, but it's just kind of something that comes with the job.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think we could do a way better job at helping to heal that injury and to optimize our physiology and our health so that we protect the brain as much as possible and give it the fuel it needs to regenerate, because it's incredible what the brain can regenerate from when it's given the proper environment to do so and the proper nutrition.
So, in addition to nutrition, what types of things would you yourself implement to heal these conditions?
Yeah, there's a pretty wide range of modalities, some really good ones. A big one that both Dr. Mark Gordon and Doc Michael Lewis are big proponents of are the use of omega-3 fatty acids, so fish oil. There's a company out there called Nordic Naturals that processes the fish oil in a way that removes all the heavy metals that can be in our ocean life these days.
Okay.
But if you can work your way up to about 3,000 milligrams a day of that fish oil, which you want to do kind of gradually because it can irritate your stomach as you get used to it, but that gives your brain basically the building blocks it needs to heal. There's some products out there. I know Dr. Mark Gordon has his brain rescue products that have a bunch of other good stuff along with the fish oil and the DHA and all the things that go in that, all these healthy fats. But you can get those off of his website, and those are outstanding. It kind of gives everything your brain needs to heal. Along with that, just doing the lab work of people, and I think the SEAL community's really caught on to this to optimize their guys' health. You put millions of dollars and decades of experience into these guys, and then you don't take care of them. It's a huge drain. Where if we can kind of put a little bit of money into doing some lab work and getting these guys on protocols to help optimize their health and keep their brains and bodies healthy, that's an investment that's well worthwhile. But
Yeah,
some
from the
other
Navy's
things,
perspective, the minimal and maybe it's a little more than minimal, but if you're investing with these guys, and listen, this is the way they look at us, we're a commodity. But if you keep that commodity healthy for longer, you're going to get more use out of them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I don't understand why they don't make more of an investment. You think it's kind of changing now where they're realizing that this is, from that perspective, like let's heal our commodities so we can use them longer.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to shift in that direction. I really hope, and I think the SEAL community is already doing it, and I think that the strike fighter community could definitely learn from it, and a lot of other communities in the military that invest a lot of money into training their personnel. Invest in it. It's going to stay there. It's going to be working at a better level. It's going to be optimized while it's there, and then it's going to stay longer, and you're not going to get as much burnout. You're not going to get as much. There's a huge retention problem in the military right now, and this is something that could help that drastically, and just keep the people that you train in good health, not only while they're in the military, but so they can go back to their families and be the bright, vibrant people that got them into that community in the first place, rather than just draining them and destroying their brains and their bodies and their souls in the process.
Yeah. 100%, man. I think the military at least owes that to these men and women. You know, they're willing. You're willing to give your life in furtherance of freedom in this country, and the least they could do is give you these modalities and keep you healthy and functioning a functioning member of society past your military career as well.
Right. Yeah. Some other things, the fish oil is something really easy that people can do.
Yep.
Something else that you can do at home, and everybody should really do, is just eating a whole foods diet. There's so much processed junk in our food system. I'd say 90+% of the stuff that you see at the grocery store is not even food these days. You pick up the labels and it's got so much processed junk in it that is, instead of adding to your vitality and helping your body and nourishing your body, it's actually draining your body. It's causing more damage. It's sending poison into your cells, which over time, it's going to make you literally be made out of garbage, and your body's not going to work right. You're not going to be getting all the essential amino acids you need. And there's ways to get around that, and that's just to get things that are whole foods. So if you can get organic food, if you have a local farmer, that's even better. Getting stuff in your area. A lot of times, local farmers don't want to have to pay for the USDA $2,000 a year or whatever it is to get that USDA certification of organic, but their food's oftentimes above the standards for USDA organic. And by eating produce that's grown in soil that's not contaminated with glyphosate, that just basically kills all life,
Yep.
you're getting nutrients from that soil. You need the little microorganisms in the soil to create things that your body can't create. And when you're eating a healthy, vibrant soil that's gone into your food, it makes you much more healthy and vibrant as well. Same with the animals that you eat. If you're eating an animal that's stuck in a CAFO, shitting on itself, pumped full of antibiotics, eating corn that body's not designed to eat, you're eating a sick animal, which is going to in time make you sick. It changes the fat composition of that animal, so that instead of being something that's actually nourishing, it's something that's going to poison your body and clog your arteries and fuck you up with time. So there's a lot you can deep dive on this food, but in general, just eat real whole food as close to the natural source as possible. The further we drift from nature, the sicker we become. Yeah. So if you're a hunter, getting wild game, venison, that's going to be much more nourishing. If you can get organic grass-fed meats, that's going to be more nourishing. Those animals are eating what they're supposed to, and because of that, their body composition is healthier. And the list goes on and on, you know.
Yeah,
I don't want to go too deep into it, but you kind of get the idea. If you pick up a thing at the grocery store and it's got 37 ingredients, which most of you can't pronounce, and they got numbers, and, that's not food, man. Don't put it in your body. It's poison. And I think what's going to revolutionize our food system is more and more people are becoming aware of this, of how poisonous our food has become. And you're seeing it in people all over, You're seeing this sickness that's, plaguing our society in America especially.
Absolutely.
But as we become aware of that, we're going to start to vote with our dollar. We're going to vote for the better foods. We're going to pay a little bit extra in food, but you're going to save a lot of money in healthcare down the road, and with the vitality of your life and the quality of your life by investing a little bit more in what you eat. And it doesn't have to be crazy expensive. You don't have to be eating 100% organic grass-fed steak for every meal. You can get rice and beans, and you can mix it up. You can go hunting, and you can get an animal for not very much that can feed your family for a while. Anyway, I kind of went off on a wild tangent there.
No, I mean, it's good for people to hear, because it makes got a profound effect on your life, but a lot of people don't think so. My wife and I eat very healthy, but as you say, expense-wise, it's amazing. If you eat a garbage diet, it's so much cheaper than if you eat, a very healthy diet. And it's sad but true. I mean, that's the way it is right now.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of the crappy food is subsidized by the government. So you're actually paying for that. It's not actually cheaper than the organic stuff. It's just being subsidized by the government, which you're paying for as our taxes continue to go up, man. So it's costing you either way.
Yeah.
But yeah, food, eating better food, drinking clean water. If you're drinking something and it tastes like chlorine, that's killing your gut microbiome. Your gut microbiome is vitally important to your health. There's trillions of organisms inside of your digestive system that basically make up a huge part of your body and drastically influence your physical and mental performance. So if you poison that microbiome that makes up your body, you're poisoning yourself. And so drinking clean water, if you get a reverse osmosis filter, distillation, there's a number of ways to do it. That'll help a lot. And make sure if you do use RO or distillation that you're remineralizing that water. Otherwise, you're going to start to get a lot of cramps and stuff if you're not replenishing those electrolytes and things that are in the water naturally, and minerals.
Yeah, very true.
Anyways, those are a few basic things you can do right at home, just by what you eat and drink, a little fish oil. If you want to get into a deeper dive, you can get some more extensive lab work done. There's a number of companies out there. A company I work with is called Transcend. But basically what they'll do is they do a pretty in-depth blood analysis on you, and they see where all your biomarkers are at. And then they give you custom nutraceuticals and supplementation to help optimize your health. And oftentimes for guys with TBI, brain injury, who've been, in law enforcement or military or athletes their whole lives, one of the biggest things that starts to go is testosterone levels. Yeah. So there's a number of ways of doing testosterone therapy, from be it enclomiphene, which basically cuts off the signal to your brain that you're producing your own testosterone, and it helps to kind of boost your own production. You can also, if you're a more severe case, may need testosterone injections and things like that, which can help boost it. Anyways, there's a whole deep dive world that you can get into on the internet on all this stuff, and I'm happy to talk about more of it. But just to give you a little bit of a glimpse into that world, once you start to look at your physiology under a microscope of this blood work, you can really fine tune it. And unfortunately, typically you go into the VA or most mainstream physicians, they're not going to do much of a lab analysis on you. They might look at your A1C and tell you where your blood sugar's at and maybe a couple other things. But especially at the VA here, I remember going in and talking to my doc about testosterone when I started to learn that might be one of the issues causing my degradation in health as I was getting worse. And they just don't get it. They're not trained in that. And,
exactly.
They're trained in the world of pharmaceuticals, and if it's not a pharmaceutical, they really don't have much knowledge on it.
Yeah, it's a shame, but that is usually the rule. So, for you guys who don't have doctors that are more progressive, ask around, shop around, because there are doctors. I had one in New York that was fantastic. We just moved to Florida last year, so I have to get a primary. But there's a lot more anti-aging clinics, and they're definitely more progressive down here, period. So I'm not worried at all.
Yeah, it's starting to pop up more and more. You're seeing more like the functional chiropractors.
Yep.
Chiropractors have for a long time kind of been advocating for this holistic approach to health. And there's really, I think, more and more people being drawn to that form of treatment, vice the go in and get your prescription form of masking symptoms, which doesn't actually improve your health.
You need to maintain the machine just like you do a car. If you sit there and you wait on your oil changes just like you do, with your car, there's going to be a price to pay. And it's the same thing with your body, your health, your mind. Everything works in conjunction with each other.
No doubt.
Absolutely. So, all right, let's get back to your flight now.
Yeah, I kind of left you guys off at the good part. But so I'm going out doing air combat maneuvering, dogfighting the jets. We did several rounds of fighting, which is kind of like a round in martial arts. You'll fight until you get to a conclusion. One guy is a clear winner or loser, and then you'll reset. And you can do several rounds of that with your fuel to get as much out of the training as possible. And the short bit of fuel and airspace and everything that you have to do so. We got to our last fight of the day. We had hit Joker fuel, meaning we had just enough fuel to knock out one more short round of fighting. Due to the compression of time and our airspace as we were exiting it, we just kind of set up quite a bit lower and quite a bit faster than we typically would, just in an attempt to kind of get a little bit more out of our training. Flight lead called 3-2-1 fights on, and we pitched the aircraft in at each other. We started about a mile abeam, and that distance very quickly vanishes, kind of like two medieval knights in a jousting match at the speed of sound. We blast by each other as we hit the merge, which is where we cross paths. And then I opted to maneuver the aircraft in a nose-low maneuver, so dive it down towards the ocean.
Okay.
I was working on a specific skill set that day, which required a low to high merge presentation for this timing reversal. Anyways, that's very probably technical and doesn't make any sense, but that's what I was thinking about, was this maneuver that when I wasn't very good at something, I would try to do it more so I'd get better at it. And so I was doing that. I was already about 30 degrees nose low at the merge and partially inverted, so I just kind of opted to continue that pull. Normally this would have been fine, and normally it takes about 5,000 feet of airspace to do a vertical maneuver in the Super Hornet and a nose low maneuver. And I was up at 10,500 feet when I started this maneuver. We were up at 12,500 feet when we started the fight. So over 2 nautical miles straight up. So the ocean wasn't an immediate concern in my mind.
Okay.
But as I hit the merge and nose low and started to pull the aircraft, as you pull that stick back, you're going up to about 7.5 Gs. You can feel that throughout your body. If just say my head and my helmet weigh about 20 pounds, sitting here at 1 G on the ground, now at almost 8 times that, it's like having 150 plus pounds just on my head.
Wow.
My body, with all the gear and everything, is like 1,600 plus pounds. You can feel that all forcing you down. So it's a high intensity interval training as you're dogfighting the aircraft. So you're squeezing your legs, you're squeezing your core. It's like you're deadlifting, you're breathing really shallowly to help keep the blood in your skull. And you're looking up, you're craning your neck all over the place with all those forces acting on your body. So it's very physically demanding. But what I felt as I kind of pointed straight at the ocean, bullseye nose low, was that force eased up. But the stick was in my lap. So it was like going around a sharp corner in a sports car and then having the steering wheel kick back halfway. Only instead of skidding off the road, I'm now skidding into the ocean that's down below me. I'm pulling the stick for my dear life. The radar altimeter goes off, warning me that I'm busting through the hard deck at 5,000 feet. I pull the throttle to idle, put out the speed brake in a desperate attempt to slow, still not realizing what's going on. And 2 seconds before I impacted the ocean, going 695 miles per hour, just 2,000 feet above the ocean, in a 51 degrees nose-low dive, so a very steep dive. Okay. I pulled the ejection handle right before I impacted the ocean. And a normal ejection is pretty violent. It will, cause flail injuries of your arms. And ideally, you want to be below 180 knots, straight and level flight. Well, I was way outside of that envelope. If you look at the chart that's in our NATOPS, which is sort of like the operations manual for the F-18, there's a chart in there for what's survivable in a Martin Baker ejection seat that I was in.
Okay.
And the parameters that I ejected in were not on that chart. So,
So how many knots are you doing at this point?
I was doing 604 indicated knots indicated airspeed, which is equivalent to 695 miles per hour. And at that altitude, that was 0.95 indicated Mach, so 95% the speed of sound. Wow. So I'm right at the transonic, right at the sound barrier. And, as you come out into that airflow, well, the force of the ejection seat igniting and rocketing out, in less than a half a second, that thing ignites, blows the canopy away, and blasts you out of the cockpit. Instantaneous G forces as that rocket ignites is about 50 Gs. And then that eases to about 12 to 14 Gs of a sustained rocket boost as you exit the aircraft. So just that force alone compresses your spine. Guys will permanently lose like an inch of stature from that force.
Wow.
And then to make matters, what made it much worse and what really messed me up was impacting the sound barrier with my body. Back in the 40s when they were trying to break the speed of sound, the engineers said you cannot go faster than the speed of sound because the drag forces acting on the aircraft at that speed are so strong. There is a wall, there's a sound barrier that you cannot penetrate. And of course the pilots said, well, watch us, and they went out and eventually proved them wrong and broke through that speed of sound. But that's right where I ejected, which is right at this barrier of wall that is so forceful. It was 100 times the force of a Category 1 hurricane impacting my body instantaneously. So this is powerful. this powerful explosive force. And it ripped my helmet off my head, caused a traumatic brain injury. I broke my C1 in my neck, the top vertebrae. My left scapula fractured. My arms flailed like ragdoll in a hurricane, fracturing both my upper humerus bones in my arms. My right humerus tore through my right brachial artery, causing rapid internal bleeding. My left forearm shattered the radius and ulna and severed the nerve that controls my left hand, the median nerve. I had a brachial plexus injury, which is the nerve that controls your upper body, much of your upper body, your arms and chest. My spine compressed. I ejected so fast that the gear on my vest all just ripped off. My radio, signaling equipment. Not that I could have used any of this stuff because my arms were just completely destroyed. My dry suit that I was wearing shredded apart because I had ejected so fast. It was literally shredding the clothing off of my body. My legs flailed so violently wearing steel-toed boots that as my legs broke, my feet turned into basically maces. These, frickin' metal boots just smashing into my lower legs as they flailed violently, causing open leg fractures of my tibia and fibula in both my lower legs, chunks of my bone falling out. I lost like a chunk of my tibia in my right leg. That's all chumming the water for Mary Lee. This all just happens in a split second,
Gotcha. Yep.
But from the moment I pulled the ejection handle, I had 2 seconds before the aircraft impacted the water. So very short period of time, it was just an explosion, parachute open, and it slowed me just enough so I didn't die on impact with the ocean. And the jet plummeted into the ocean and just vaporized. The biggest pieces that they found of it were maybe the size of a crumpled up license plate.
Wow.
And then I splashed into the ocean. That parachute that had just saved my life very quickly sunk underneath the ocean swell with all those waves and current and started to pull me under. We have a system called the Seawers, which is a saltwater activated explosive device that connects our parachute harness to the risers on the parachute. And that's designed because upper body injuries are so common in high-speed ejections out of jet aircraft that you typically can't reach up and manually disconnect the coke fittings. One of the Seawers fired, but it didn't disconnect, and the other one didn't fire at all. We've got some Vietnam-era survival equipment, in use.
Really?
And it doesn't always work the way it's supposed to. In fact, my dry suit, at this point, none of my gear had held up. My helmet had ripped off my head, so I had no reflective tape anymore. I had, the Seawers malfunction, parachute now stuck to me. My survival gear had shredded off. My dry suit had ripped open. The beacon in my seat didn't activate or work. And so basically all my...
At this point?
I was in and out of consciousness. I have no linear memory from the time I pulled the ejection handle, but over the years I had gotten back a lot of night terrors of what it was going on in that water. And between my little flashes of what happened and the entire investigation that went down, they were able to really recreate the story in great detail so that I can, share it very accurately.
It's incredible.
But yeah, at this point, it was a miracle to be alive just from the force of that ejection. And then now I'm being drowned alive by my parachute. For anybody who's ever been held under the water when you need a breath of air, you know how terrible that feeling is when you start to, guppy and suck in water into your lungs and how uncomfortable that is. Well, that's basically where I was now going to be hanging out. And
your arms are jello, right? You're not even able
my
to
arms are jello. My legs are destroyed.
Fracture, right?
Yep, both arms,
Wow.
both legs. I was just jello. My body was no longer responding to inputs. Fortunately, my flight lead spotted my parachute opening. He dropped the GPS mark of my location, which was very quickly going to be moving because now I'm in the moving ocean current.
Yep.
But in his short time and what little fuel he had left, he was able to spot a fishing vessel nearby. He got down really low and really fast and thumped over the bow of their vessel and was able to get their attention and get them on maritime guard frequency and direct them over to my approximate location. And what that fishing vessel did is they weren't able to get me out of the water, but they at least provided a rough visual cue of where I was at as the rescue continued. Now, air traffic control is involved. Other aircraft are getting overhead. There's a Coast Guard vessel coming my way. Multiple Navy H-60 Seahawk rescue helicopters have been dispatched to come to my location for the search and rescue. And then I spent the next hour and a half just bobbing under the surface, sucking in water, in and out of consciousness, just thinking that any moment this big old great white shark's just going to sneak up from that blue abyss and finish me off, images of like Jaws are in my head.
Exactly.
I'm bleeding out. This shark is definitely going to eat me.
God.
I later learned that sharks of that size, this is like a 3,500 pound shark. Anything over about 1,000 pounds with white sharks, they're not really attracted to human blood or fish blood. They're attracted to whale and seal. So I didn't know that at the time, but a shark expert dude told me that.
So you got lucky in one respect.
Yeah. And anyways, one rescue helicopter showed up. They had been informed to bring me back to the aircraft carrier that was nearby, and not realizing the extent of my injuries, their rescue swimmer jumped in and actually swam past my location to the fishing vessel due to a miscommunication. Meanwhile, another rescue helicopter from HSC 28 arrived on scene, and their rescue swimmer, their pilot actually spotted me first. They were the first people to actually get their eyes on me out of the aircraft, and got down low, got the rescue swimmer in, call sign Cheech. He got down in and he was able to cut loose the paracord. He had trained in the pool, where you're drug under and you see the bottom of a lit pool and a warm pool, and it's still good training. But he said once he hooked into my titanium carabiner, and the force of that parachute pulled both of us under, with him swimming as hard as he could and still getting drug underneath. He's like, that was terrifying to look down and just see this dark blue abyss and all the tangled paracord pulling us under. But he kept a level head. His training kicked in and he cut all that paracord loose, got us both to the surface, and then got me back into the helicopter. A week prior, he had actually been involved in another rescue effort of a Navy MH-53 Sea Dragon helicopter. One of these big heavy lift helicopters went down very close to the same position. And the Navy policy at the time was anybody who's in an ejection or an aircraft crash has to be put onto a backboard before they're lifted up into the helicopter. And while most of the crew of that Sea Dragon crash survived the impact, because it took so long to put every single crew member onto a backboard and lift them up, several of them perished from hypothermia. So he is coming off that from the week prior, He should have probably had some time off to process all that, but he didn't get any of it. He was right back in the same ocean a week later, saving my dumb ass. And, he gets in there. He says, we're not going to put him on a backboard, even if he has a spinal injury. If he dies from hypothermia, who cares? That's the priority now. He's been in the water for over an hour and a half at 37 degrees Fahrenheit. He should be dead. So he opted to get me up into the helicopter. When they got me into the helicopter, one of the crew members, Joey, had started eating a meatball sandwich right before they got this search and rescue call. And he kind of threw it in the wrapper and threw it in the cockpit, or in the cabin, like in the side. And as I'm in there, like thrashing around, they're resuscitating me. I'm coding in and out of consciousness the whole ride to Norfolk General. That meatball sub breaks loose and just gets covered all over me. So as they're wheeling me off of the helicopter to Norfolk General, this level 1 trauma center, they're having to explain to the medical staff, like, hey, this guy's in bad shape, but that's just Joey's lunch all over him. They get me.
Parmesan.
It was delicious.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what kept me alive. It was just that delicious marinara. They wheeled me into the hospital. They treated me for severe hypothermia. When they took my core body temperature, I was at 87 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
I should have been dead from hypothermia, but the hypothermia had actually prevented me from bleeding to death. Had my dry suit actually not ripped open, I would have bled to death way before anybody got there. It also helped to preserve brain function, that colder temperature.
Okay.
They treated the hypothermia. They pumped the salt water out of my lungs. They had to do multiple blood transfusions because I had lost so much blood. My kidneys were failing with rhabdo, so they're trying to deal with that. My organs are shutting down from just the overwhelming amount of trauma. Yep. Once they got me semi-stable, they induced a coma and then rushed me into surgery. And I spent the next week undergoing over a dozen trauma surgeries. Fasciotomies to salvage my limbs on all 4 extremities, which is, not that long ago they would just amputate if you had a really bad break. because as that break, all that injury swells up with inflammation, it cuts off the circulation of blood to the extremity and the limb dies.
So it's like compartment syndrome?
Exactly. Compartment syndrome was happening to all 4 of my extremities. So, in order to prevent amputation, the skilled surgeon had to come in and perform these fasciotomies to open up all that fascia tissue, which is like the coating over our muscles that was just like suffocating the muscle as it swelled. So they open that tissue up so that the muscle can expand and the circulation can return.
Okay.
So limb salvage procedures to all 4 extremities. Once they stopped the compartment syndrome, they rebuilt my skeleton with titanium rods and steel plates. So now if you see my x-ray, it looks like a legit like Wolverine from X-Men, both my legs and both my arms.
That's crazy. I have a spinal fusion, so I have the plate and screws in my back, but I cannot imagine the amount of metal you have in your body.
Yeah, I thought I was going to set off every freaking metal detector ever, but it's actually it's such a high grade titanium and surgical steel that it doesn't really set anything off.
Yeah, I could.
But they did all that. They did a brachial artery bypass, and then I was a good week into this coma, and my squadron mates and my family are all at the ICU waiting room once I'm transferred back to the Naval Hospital in Portsmouth, just waiting to hear if I'm going to live. Is it going to be a vegetable? At this point, my future was looking pretty bleak if I was going to survive even at all. Wow. But Basil, actually the same guy who was kind of giving me hell before the flight that I just hadn't done anything dumb enough to earn a call sign, kind of pipes up and goes, "Oh, he's a scrappy motherfucker. He'll be fine." And so the whole squadron just kind of burst into laughter. And they took scrappy motherfucker and they shortened it down into a makeshift acronym, Smurf. And because it's the military, you have to have a politically correct cover story.
Yep.
So they said, because you're a short guy that turned blue from hypothermia. And that's how we got it passed, by the upper echelons.
That's great. So you actually have to get an approval for a nickname? I thought the boys just bestowed upon you.
I think it used to be like that, but there was a bit of a debacle in the Navy with the call sign that was given that caused a whole political shenanigans. Yep. And so by the time I was going through, you had to have an approval process. And I think that's probably even raised up, maybe it used to have to be the command skipper. It's probably like an admiral at this point that's got to give you the thumbs up on your call sign.
That's pretty funny.
But so at least I got a call sign on all of this. And after 2 weeks in that coma, the lights just started to come back on. I could hear voices around me. I had no idea where I was between all the fentanyl and Dilaudid and pain meds that they had me on, plus the brain injury. I was just in a dreamland. I didn't know where I was for the most part at first. But as I kind of opened my eyes, as I heard those voices, I could smell the disinfectant stink. I could hear all this beeping, and I had all these cables and things all connected to me, and I was in this room that was like a glass fishbowl with all this equipment, but it didn't even make sense to me. It was like waking up in my own bedroom, but why were all these people and all this equipment around me? Like, I was just sleeping. I had no recollection of the ejection at this point. And as I kind of came to, and everybody was so happy to see me, the medical staff eventually came in and just kind of gave me the prognosis, like, hey, you've been in this high-speed ejection, you've broken all these bones, all these limb damages, brain injury, you're likely never going to walk again, you're not going to be able to use your arms again, and your military flying career is over. And in that moment, something in me was just kind of like, well, fuck you guys, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I don't think they told me because they knew that would work. I think they were just, being realistic. But then it just became my mission to sort of stoke that little ember of hope that I had. There was, as I kind of came to and the brain injury started to ease and I started to kind of realize a little bit more, it was crushing now. I had just been in a high-speed ejection. Was it my fault? Is my career over? Am I even going to be able to walk? Am I ever going to be able to wipe my own ass again? Like, there was a lot of opportunity to latch onto all the darkness that was crushing me at that point. Absolutely. But I chose to just hold on to that ember of visualizing what's it going to be like when I get back in the cockpit? What's it going to be like when I get to come back into this hospital in my flight suit with my wings back on my chest and go, look at me, motherfuckers. I'm back. And so that became my driving force every day.
That's awesome.
And at first, I couldn't move anything. I was just shitting on myself, stuck in this little room with beeps and squeaks and patients yelling in the other rooms, eating garbage food, not sleeping. It was miserable. But little by little, I started to regain a little bit of function. I got transferred down to VA inpatient psych facility, the VA Polytrauma Center in Richmond, Virginia, and that's where I was treated for the next 3 months as an inpatient with every kind of therapy known to man. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, kinesiotherapy, aquatherapy, recreational therapy, vision therapy, speech therapy. I had to relearn how to do pretty much everything.
Also, even talk.
Yeah, because of the brain injury, they did the speech therapy to help me rebuild my brain as part of that. And little by little, I started to get a little bit of function back. Eventually, I was able to walk with a walker. And while I think the VA system has improved drastically from what it was back in the Vietnam era, where it was 12 dudes smashed in a room, covered in piss, shit, and blood and vomit, maybe getting to see a nurse once a day, and basically leaving with nothing but a morphine addiction in a wheelchair,
Yep.
After getting drafted into a war that they didn't necessarily even sign up to fight in. It was a shit show back then. And while a lot has improved, there were definitely still some shortcomings at the VA that I would love to see improve, which would be simple fixes in my mind. One, the food was just abysmal. All the stuff we just talked about with the ultra-processed junk food, that's what all the food was, They're spending all this money on the pharmaceuticals and the therapy and the staff and these facilities, but there was no money going into just the basic nutrition, which is probably, next to sleep, the most important thing in healing the body. And also sleep. They would wake you up all night to take your vitals and to give you medication to sleep. So it was backwards in those senses. The staff was very caring. There was a lot of good people there supporting you, but there was a couple things that were like, we can do better than that. And the people that are in there, I was in my mid-20s and I was like the oldest guy in there. These guys are young. There was a guy, a young 18-year-old infantryman that had been hit by an RPG. There was another young EOD dude from the SEAL teams who had a parachuting accident and just destroyed his legs and hip and internal organs. There's another 18-year-old dude in there that was in a motorcycle accident when someone ran through a stoplight and smashed him. There's all these just young kids, man.
Yeah.
And they're all in there trying to get better. And unfortunately, the food that they're given and the nutrition and the sleep is non-existent, which I think that's the absolute foundation of healing, is getting good sleep, getting decent nutrition, and drinking good, clean water, and getting some sunlight and exercise eventually are crucial too. But that was a little bit backwards. But eventually I got out of that facility after 3 months. I was able to get around on a walker, and I continued my outpatient therapy. And then for the next 2 years, underwent more surgeries, overcame prescription drug addiction to all the meds that they had me on, which really, that was a pretty miserable process of having to go through. And the whole system was kind of designed to just keep me on those meds. Like, oh, it's working for you. Why would you get off of them? So I just kind of had to wean myself off of them one at a time. And that was pretty brutal experience over the course of several months. But eventually I got clean of that stuff. I was able to get a stack of medical waivers as my body and mind recovered. Physically, I was doing much better. I got to the point where I was able to max out the Navy's physical fitness test. I was literally running circles around the people at my command. And after 2 years of all of that, I got back to the Super Hornet and got back to flying. And this is kind of where the Disney version of my story would end as a happy ending, but this is actually where the story gets even more crazy.
Yeah, I've heard it, and it's truly mind-boggling what happens from this point.
So from this point, I'm back in the Fleet Squadron. I'm stationed out in Lemoore, California with VFA 136 Nighthawks, flying F-18 Echoes again, and, just feeling on top of the world, like to overcome all of that. And then I start to notice little mental lapses that I largely just ignored. And I was on a particular flight down in Florida at Tyndall Air Force Base doing in Wessup, which was a live fire missile shoot. And I went out, I shot a live heat-seeking missile at a drone, and then broke off and did dissimilar air combat training, so dogfighting with a F-22 Raptor from the Air Force. And when I got back from that flight, I had very vivid memory of fighting the Raptor, but I couldn't remember a lot of the missile shoot. And as I'm watching my tapes in the debrief, I'm realizing I'm just like kind of confused about a lot of it. Like, what happened here? I don't understand. I'm not recognizing basic symbology on the radar display, and like there's just these mental lapses that are just exacerbated so badly all of a sudden.
Okay.
I go back to my hotel that night. I try to sleep it off, can't sleep. Luckily, the next day I'm just on duty, so I'm manning the radio and the phone and coordinating the flight schedule, just kind of doing ground stuff. I get done with that day and I just feel even worse. So I go back to my hotel and I sit down on the bed, and then the whole room just starts to tumble over me. I was getting vertigo, which I had never experienced before. I was getting panic attacks. I was having insomnia. I could not sleep to save my life. And what really did it for me is I took out my phone because I had to set an alarm to get up the next morning to go fly.
Okay.
And as I'm trying to operate my cell phone, I can't do the math, and I can't figure out how to use the alarm clock. So I'm like, there's something really messed up. I called the squadron safety officer, and he ended up taking me to Mayport Dive Base, which was fortunately just 20 minutes away from there. And they put me in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber to treat me for suspected type 2 decompression sickness. There had been a number of incidents in the F-18 community where the pressurization systems were malfunctioning and causing rapid decompression of the cockpit. And for any scuba divers out there, if you come up from depth too quickly, the nitrogen in your blood can come out of solution and form little bubbles. And those little bubbles, if they get in your joints, they call it the bends or type 1 DCS. It's really uncomfortable. If those little bubbles get into your brain, it can cause more like aneurysm type symptoms. It can cut off the blood flow. It can even kill you, if you get a bad enough bubble built up in there. So they suspected that might have happened. I was treated overnight in this facility, and I felt a little bit better the next day, but again, I still had insomnia. I couldn't sleep. So when I went to see the doc at the dive base, he's like, hey man, considering your history, I think there might be more going on. So when you get back to California, I need to go and see the flight surgeon, which after getting all these medical waivers and going through years to battle my way back in the cockpit, the last thing I wanted to do was to go in and say something was wrong again.
Yeah.
Because as I know it's probably the same in law enforcement. If you go in and you start to say you have something going on with you, you're likely going to lose your clearance to do your job.
That's the biggest thing, stigma-wise. Guys don't want to do that because the guns and badges get taken, they get put on a desk duty, and now everyone knows what's going on as well. So, there's definitely forward momentum as far as changing procedures and the way guys and girls are treated in that respect. Because, it encourages people not to seek help, which is obviously what you don't want happening.
Right. And I knew I had to do something because it had gotten to the point where I wasn't going to be able to operate an aircraft. I didn't want to get somebody else killed. I didn't want to crash an aircraft again. And so I went in when I got back to California and saw the flight surgeon. I pretty quickly got a referral to psychology. They threw a bunch of apps on my phone at me to do cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive processing therapy, all these apps that I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm coming in here, I've got something real going on, and you just want me to do some apps on my phone and come talk to you about them once a week? So I was very frustrated. As that continued to not work, obviously, I got a delayed onset PTSD diagnosis thrown at me. And while I had a very serious traumatic brain injury that was causing a lot of this dysfunction, at the time it was just completely overlooked. And they just bit off on the whole behavioral health thing, which was, how do you feel? And it made me feel like this was all just in my head. And all I needed to do was just get the fuck over it, which wasn't helping.
Yeah.
And
how do they go from this abstract possible mental issue? How do they go from a physical issue to this abstract possible mental issue when, in fact, you've got the history of that crash, and it's not the first thing that they look at?
I think there was largely just a misunderstanding of traumatic brain injury at that point, and I think it's starting to get better. Unfortunately, the way that system is designed, it's designed to give you a psychological symptoms to give you a diagnosis and give you medicine, to give you pharmaceuticals. And so pretty quickly thereafter, I was seeing the psychiatrist, and I was given SSRIs, which did nothing. And then I was given a medication called quetiapine, which is an antipsychotic medication that at low doses was supposed to help with insomnia, which it did. It knocked me out so I would actually be asleep, but it wasn't a restful sleep. It was just sort of this drug-induced state of unconsciousness that wasn't restful. And so it would mask my symptoms a little bit, but as time went on, just like with all those pain meds I had been ramped up on, you need more of it and more of it to work. And as the dosage goes up, the side effects get worse. And meanwhile, that underlying physiology in my brain that was physically damaged was just being exacerbated worse and worse as time went on. And they just kept masking it with pills. And that, unfortunately, is the way the mainstream medicine system works when you're dealing with TBI and PTSD, which honestly, I think those two are very much interconnected. Even if you're not blown out of a cockpit, or even if you're not in an explosion, IED attack, you don't have to have just one big physical impact to your brain. Emotional trauma, stress, a lifetime of being in a high stress environment, those things can wear and tear on your body and your brain and cause dysfunction in your mental physiology. And you get these symptoms, which often get labeled as PTSD or maybe some other mental diagnoses. But the real thing that's going on is something that's actually going on in the physiology of your brain.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that wasn't the treatment that I received, through the military. Instead, I just got given more and more of these pills. And as time went on, I went from, dealing with insomnia. I started getting more and more hypervigilant, like just constantly on high alert, super stressed out, paranoid. I started to, think that people were following me. And as things degraded, I went into more and more of a psychosis state. I thought I was in the Truman Show. I thought everybody that I was interacting with they were all actors. It was all fake. I thought that when I turned on the radio that the song was specifically put on there to fuck with me. Like, things began to spiral out of control pretty quickly.
Yep.
My wife had just had our first little boy, so she's dealing with being a new mother with a little newborn, and now she's got me, a full-grown adult who's capable of jumping in a car and driving off and doing crazy shit. Yeah. And she's trying to manage me, which was much more difficult than dealing with a newborn. As time went on,
you tell the doctors what's going on at this point, or you're kind of keeping it to yourself because you're thinking, what the hell's wrong with me?
Yeah, I masked a lot of it because I didn't want people to think I was fucking crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But they knew that, they kind of knew the direction I was heading because of my wife being very open about it. My wife is a trauma nurse working in the ER, so she had dealt with psych patients. She had seen what the inpatient facilities were like, and she didn't want me to have to go through that. So she was doing everything she could to keep me out of an inpatient facility.
Okay.
Because those places are a fucking nightmare that don't heal people. They make them worse oftentimes. But she knew that, fortunately, so she was doing everything she could. Eventually, I was medically retired from the military, moved back to northern Michigan with my family, and my wife had actually gone for a job interview. And when she came home, she heard me rustling around, and she came into the bedroom, I think is the room I was in. She comes in, and I was completely naked. I had shaved off all my hair, all my facial hair. I'd shaved off my eyebrows in like patches, so my hair just looked like a crazy person.
Yeah.
I had a black plastic garbage bag tied around my neck like a cape because I thought I was going to go out into the northern Michigan snowy weather and fight crime like a superhero. And so that very quickly got my wife's attention. She got me clothed, she got me loaded up in the vehicle, and then drove me to the emergency room about an hour from our home. And then I spent the next few nights just in an out-of-body experience as I think my soul left my body in the psychosis state. And I was just traveling through time and space, and my body was just laying there on the floor, lifeless, in this plexiglass room. My mom said,
full of drugs, I assume, at this point as well.
Oh yeah, I don't know what all they put me on, but I was gone. My mom came in to see me, and she said she sat down next to me, and I just had the TV on static, and I was just clicking the button with my eyes real wide, just watching the static, and I was just saying, "Do you see that? Do you see that? Do you see that? Do you see that?" completely out of my mind. In my mind, what I was seeing was when I clicked down on the channels, I could go back in time and see like the age of the dinosaurs or the cavemen or whatever, and so on and so forth, back to like the beginning of the earth, like, you know. Then if I went forward on the remote and went up, it was showing me further and further into the future. So I jumped to like this apocalyptic future where everybody was addicted to Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos ruled the world, and everybody was just drowning in garbage.
Rule the world, so
and
it's probably a great prediction, actually.
maybe some truth to it. And I was just completely out of my mind, and seeing this apocalyptic doom and this future of like nuclear disaster. And anyways, and what my mom's seeing is her son there just clicking this remote, staring at the staticky TV. They ended up transferring me down to Battle Creek VA inpatient psych facility, which, you know, a mental hospital for veterans. And I kind of came to on the floor of this little room in the dark, not knowing what was going on. You know, initially I thought my dick had gotten chopped off. Like, it was all sorts of fucked up stuff in the psychosis state. Yeah. But as I kind of started to regain moments of being lucid and coming back to reality, you know, I came out into this facility, and, you know, it's a very small facility loaded with a bunch of other veterans undergoing similar issues with psychoses and mental health issues. A lot of these guys are coming in off the streets with serious drug addiction issues, and their brains are just fried from, you know, their experiences in the military leading to drug addiction issues, leading to homelessness, you know, leading to mental dysfunction at its worst, which was basically everybody in there dealing with serious problems. You know, there's a guy wandering the halls who looks like he's been there from the 1970s, long, scraggly gray hair, just yelling and screaming at himself and running up and down the hallways. There's another dude in there that would just come in and he's like Cookie Monster, just like he would gobble up food time and then he would just go run away. You know, just a bunch of people losing their minds in this place. Yeah. And as I came to more and more, you know, I was really kind of heartbroken to see the treatment of veterans in these facilities that paralleled what I experienced in training in the military for survival training in a prisoner of war situation, which is, you know, what you do to break somebody in a prisoner of war situation is you confine them, you treat them less than human, you malnourish them, you sleep deprive them. And now you take military guys that are physically and mentally robust and you put them through that training for just a few days to a week, and perfectly healthy people start to have visual and auditory hallucinations, delusional thinking. Now you take guys that are already in a psychotic state, you sleep deprive them because when you're on one-to-one care in the inpatient psych facility, they're required to come in every 15 minutes and shine a flashlight in your face to make sure that you were okay and safe. It's also not an easy place to sleep to begin with, even without them shining a flashlight in your face every 15 minutes, because there's other dudes running up and down the hallways, yelling and screaming, having violent outbursts. The doors are slamming. There's a brightly fluorescent lit hallway right next to your room that's just glaring in this white light all night. There's stomping boots. There's keys jangling. Like, it's a hard place to sleep in when everything's made out of concrete and echoey.
It's like one flew over the cuckoo's nest. It's exactly what it sounds like.
It was very similar. A lot of parallels to that movie. You know, the sleep was awful. You were dressed in prison scrubs, and then the staff were all in white lab coats. So there was this sort of like Stanford prison experiment sort of dynamic between the medical staff and volunteers, and then the veterans or patients, or, you know, we felt kind of like prisoners to me. We're literally dressed in the same clothes. A lot of the staff was really good and respected us, but there were also people there that were not that were there, you know, and would oftentimes, because you're in a psychosis and at times you're fucking loony, they start to treat you like you're no longer a human, you're no longer there. But you really still are. Even in my deepest psychoses, I was still the same me somewhere deep inside there, watching what was going on. The food there was ultra-processed, junky trash food that was even worse than the VA Polytrauma Center, you know. Really? Just ultra-processed junk, man. There was everything from, you know, the little margarine packets that you got. It wasn't butter. It was like 30 different ingredients. I made the mistake of asking for a salad once, and what I got was a plastic container full of white shredded iceberg lettuce with this little anemic pinkish whitish cherry tomato on top, and a packet of dressing that was full of seed oils, artificial colors, and flavors. So just junk. That your body wasn't getting any nutrition. The water that came out of the tap there tasted like it came out of a broken hot tub. In order to make it consumable, they would load it up with this artificially flavored and colored raspberry lemonade tea stuff. So you're not nourishing your body with the food or nutrition that you're getting. We didn't get to go outside more than maybe once a week at most. And when we did go outside, we were put into a concrete yard that was mashed in between these 4 brick buildings that were this facility with 8 to 10 foot metal fences all around it. So you're not getting sunlight, you're not getting exercise, you're hardly getting any fresh air, you're treated less than human, you're malnourished, you're sleep deprived. This is all the same stuff that you would do to a prisoner of war, to break them, to make them malleable to do whatever you want them to do. And what they want you to do at this facility is they want you to take pharmaceutical drugs. That is the one thing that they have in abundance. And so before long, I was taking who knows how many different pills in this little cup that they would give you all throughout the day. I had no idea what all I was on. And when I started to see what was really going on in this facility, it filled me with rage to the point that I planned an escape. I started stockpiling warmer clothes. I started collecting snacks and stashing them in my room. I started making weapons out of wet balled up socks inside of tube socks in case I had to fight my way out. And I came up with a plan to escape. And late one night, this woman I called Goldie that worked in the facility, that was fucking cruel and unusual individual, would come into my room every 15 minutes, and she made a real point to get that flashlight right in my face. She was just, I don't know what was up with her, but she had some reason that she really wanted to just
to
take it out on me.
Yep.
And she would get in my face with this flashlight, and she'd, I'm just making sure you're safe. And then she would go around and do it to other people in the facility. And she kept coming in my room doing that. And I got so outraged by her, I got right in her face. And I got real close, and I just smelled her. And I go, "You stink." And all I wanted to do was I was holding back with everything that I had not to just smash this woman's head into the ground and murder her in my room, because I was that close to doing it.
Yeah.
And then again, she kept doing it throughout the night, over and over and over. And I'm just nodding in and out of this delusional state of sleep deprivation. And she comes in to do it again. And I ran out of the room, and I pulled the fire alarm on the wall. And my hope was, by setting off the fire alarm, they would evacuate the veterans from the building for the fire. And those of us that were with it enough, we could make a run for it. A lot of the people in that facility were already just zombie mode, man, from all the drugs that they were on. They were just walking around mindlessly. But there were still some of us in there that wanted to get the hell out of it. That didn't work. I ended up getting forcibly injected with this shit called Haldol, which was fucking terrible, torturous experience, literally. It felt like insects were crawling underneath my skin all throughout my body. All I wanted to do was rip my own skin off, run and scream. And if you've ever seen a movie about a psych facility and you see someone yelling and screaming and going completely nuts that they have to strap down onto a board with leather straps, that guy probably just got injected with Haldol, because that's what it'll do to you. And I think it was the next day, maybe 2 days later, I kind of came to. I was just completely out of it, literally drooling on myself, and I was escorted into a room with this person that was supposed to be my legal representation. Now, to this point, I had been voluntarily admitted to this facility. Okay. I hadn't committed any crime. I was there on my own accord, yet I was not allowed to leave when I requested to do so. But on this day, I think in part, my family wasn't ready to take me back. They wanted me to, stabilize a little, but also the facility had a lot of red tape. And in my mind, I was very frustrated by that, because I was like, I'm still a human being. I don't want to be here. I see what's going on. This is not healing. But for a number of reasons, they kept me in the facility. And after that Haldol incident, They brought me into this room, and they just put a pen in my hand, and then the attorney had me just kind of scribble on all these documents. I couldn't even read at this point or comprehend what was going on. But what I did is I had committed myself to the facility. I had been stripped of my constitutional right to bear arms. I'm still legally no longer allowed to purchase a firearm. I was put on the law enforcement information network as if I had committed a felony.
Jesus.
So here I am, an American veteran, just trying to get help. And instead I'm held captive, tortured, imprisoned, and then have my constitutional rights stripped from me.
This is criminal.
It's happening every day to veterans,
I can imagine.
and it's devastating, and you know, eventually I think I spent just over 40 days in this facility, and my family was able to get me out, largely through their support. With my wife being a trauma nurse, my parents both working in the medical world, they were able to advocate for me and get me out. And most of the people in there, they didn't have that, but they eventually got me out back home, and I was just a broken human at that point. I was so depressed. I felt just deep betrayal from the country I had served. Like, how could they treat people like that? How could this all just be a racket to get you pumped full of pharmaceuticals until you put a gun in your own mouth? And I was miserable to be around, man. My kids would come up and try to play with me, and I would just tell them to leave me alone. I could barely do the dishes. My concentration was gone, and the same treatment continued. Just more pills, more pills. You just got to take these pills. It's your best hope. And I had started drinking. I had started using more cannabis. Like, I was just doing anything I could to try to numb myself. And fortunately, oh, bless you. Fortunately,
I'm gonna have to edit this one out. Michelle only puts us down at 120 mark.
And fortunately, at this point, I stumbled across a book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. And that opened my eyes to the fact that there's this thing called psychedelic-assisted therapy that could help me heal. And I had already started to incorporate more holistic living at this point. You know, I was eating better food. I was taking a lot of the poisonous shit that's in the mainstream diet out of my diet. I had started to cut out alcohol and cannabis, and so I was starting to get some improvement from that.
Okay.
And then I got to experience a psilocybin ceremony with these magic mushrooms. And while it didn't fix everything, to use Michael Pollan's analogy from his book, it was like a fresh snowfall over all these ruts of negative emotions and behaviors that had become me. And it gave me this new opportunity to go down this mountain of my life and take a new path and to build new habits. And it also made me correlate the relationship between all the meds that they had been giving me and how my condition continued to worsen and worsen. And I saw the just absolute insane cycle that was. And so I started to wean myself off of the medications that I was on, which took several months and you know, a lot of sleepless nights. But little by little, I was able to get off it. And I was still in a rough spot when I got connected with the Warrior Angel Foundation. And I ended up going down to Texas to an event that they were putting on. And I met an entire community of guys like you and me. You know, there were guys there from the SEAL community, Marcus and Amber Capone. There was the former Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller. Lieutenant General Christopher Miller was there. We had SEALs, we had MARSOC, we had Rangers, we had Marines, we had all of these people from all of these high-speed military government jobs. And we all had the same theme to our story, which was we had served and we had been, you know, high performers in our careers. We had gotten jacked up through the course of our careers for a number of reasons, explosions, cumulative effect of decades of combat, you know, you name it.
Yeah.
And then we all had TBI, traumatic brain injury, but then we all got a PTSD label thrown on us, got put on a bunch of psych meds that caused our entire lives to fall apart around us. And, you know,
it's a common story, man.
And I finally had like confirmation, like I am on the right path, and I'm not alone to think that taking all those pills and just going to see the VA psychiatrist, that is bullshit, and it's not working, and it's hurting people. And maybe there's a place for some of those things for a very short period of time to transition through a very rough situation of psychoses, but it's not a long-term solution. The long-term solution is addressing the traumatic brain injury, the physiology of our brain. And the way Warrior Angel Foundation helped me do that Initially was through a peyote ceremony with a Native American group, which reconnected me to see that I still had a purpose in life. It gave me that spark back that was me to say, you're still here for a reason. You've been through hell. You have every right to be pissed off and feel betrayed from your government that you served, but you're here for a purpose. You've been through that darkness because you could handle it. And now it's your turn to lift other people up that are stuck in that same hopeless place with a gun in their mouth like you were not long ago. And that gave me just like reinvigorated with, I'm here for a reason. I need to share my story. And so that's been my mission since. And, you know, I've gotten help through TBI clinics. I've gotten help through psychedelic assisted therapy. And through that, I've rebuilt the physiology of my brain. I've rebuilt my body. And most importantly, I've gotten my fucking soul back and a mission and a purpose to share that with others and help lift others up like you're doing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. I mean, that's exactly what happened to me. Coming out of my first ayahuasca experience, I was told by the universe, your mission, life's purpose is now to go forth and help other vets and first responders heal theirs. And I literally said out loud, okay. And it's been a beautiful thing. And I'll tell you, I've been to 3 vet and first responder ceremonies, no civilians. And to me, it's the most beautiful thing because you're seeing, you know, listen, there's profound pain going on, but there's profound healing going on as well. Mm-hmm. And when you look around, especially in integration, I think integration is one of the greatest experiences you could have. And for people that don't know what it is, it's essentially after you journey with whatever modality you used, you talk about, essentially in a circle, you talk about what brought you there, how your journey was, and what you want to do continuing forward. And to hear other people's journeys and the profound pain they've been through. And listen, you'll hear guys and girls with sexual traumas. And number one, you realize, man, my stuff is not nearly as, and I don't want to compare trauma from one person to the next, but, you know, you kind of, not that you're selfish in when you're thinking about what's going on with yourself, but you're like, man, it could always be a lot worse. Oh, and number two, the profound healing. Like, I remember one specific ceremony, 2 guys acknowledged the fact they had suicidal ideology going to the service. It was gone. One guy said, I woke up happy this morning. It's been years since I woke up happy. There was another Green Beret that was on 17 medications. I think it was the second time drinking. He's like, I haven't touched a medication since, and I literally wake up happy every day of my life now. Like, you know, you and I talk about this, and people hearing it for the first time, probably pessimistic. Yeah, there's no way it can work like this. It's drugs. First of all, it's not drugs. It's plant-based medicines. They've been used for thousands of years. I consider them sacred. It's not something that you just find in a pill bottle you take. It's going to cure you.
It's unusual, actually, in this period of history that we don't have these indigenous medicines as part of our community. Yep. And I think it's part of the reason that things are kind of spinning out of control in so many negative ways is we've disconnected from that, which is, if you go back in time in human history, these things, these substances, these indigenous medicines have been part of communities for thousands and thousands of years, prehistory. And we're kind of like in this weird, 100-year period where that stuff's kind of been put under wraps and demonized and yeah, if you just go take a bunch of psychedelics and don't do the proper dosage or have it laced with stuff, bad things can happen. Yeah. I'm not saying to just go buy a handful of this crap from some guy on the street and go do it on your own. No. But when you do it with reverence in a ceremonial setting, you do it with people that know how to give you the proper dosage, you prepare for it, and then you integrate your lessons learned after to rebuild new habit patterns, you can have profound change in your life on so many levels, especially if you stick with it and you really learn from it. Now you can you can go on one of these guided journeys in the best situation possible, and then you can come home and jump right back into your old life and your old habit patterns. And all that benefit from resetting your default node network and getting this new chance to rebuild your neurochemistry, you can just go right back into your old rut, and you're not going to get anything from it either. But when you do it, like you said, with integration and you build new habit patterns and you learn from it and you grow into the person that you want to be instead of the person you were, and you change. The biggest thing is you have to change your habits. Yep. And it enables you to do so on a very deep physical and emotional level and spiritual level that, I didn't go into any of this thinking that I was going to get some sort of spiritual awakening from it, but the profound effect that has had is maybe the most powerful component of all of this. And, I can't tell you what to believe in, and I know I would have been that stubborn bastard who was like, yeah, right, whatever. I wouldn't have believed it until I experienced it myself.
So I was.
But I think a lot of these indigenous medicines put you in touch with something that's beyond comprehension of our five senses. It's something beyond just, what we can see and smell and touch and hear. We have an extremely limited perception as a human. Yeah. We have limitations of our logic. We have limitations of our perception. And there's so much else going on around us that we cannot see, smell, taste, touch. Even just the spectrum of light we can see is limited. We can't see ultraviolet or infrared. We can't hear the frequencies a dog can hear. Yep. We can't smell what a dog can smell. Like, there's so much more going on just in those basic senses that we can't perceive.
Yeah,
and once you get a glimpse that there's so much more going on around us and that we are all connected through that, whatever you want to call that, it's a beautiful thing, and it makes you want to help others and be of service and to lift other people up as you grow as well.
Yeah, it just brings you to this higher consciousness, and you think about things you never thought about before. You think about things that you have thought about before, but in a totally different light. You come out with so much more empathy and love in your heart. And it's funny because Wiz has a saying. He's like, if I would have heard me talk like this 5 years ago, I would have punched myself in the face.
That's true.
And the fact that I'm talking like this, people that know me, I'm sure they're stunned. Not that I was a caveman, but I grew up with a very stern father. I can never really acknowledge my feelings, and I never did. And I calloused up, and then I went to this hyper-masculinized profession, and became even more so. You just have to stay hyper-focused on a mission. You can't acknowledge any pain that's going on around you. And when you finally do, when you take these medicines, and I was telling someone the other day, it's not the medicine itself that does the healing. The medicine allows you to break down all these walls that you've been surrounded by.
Definitely.
And now you can experience yourself, and you can experience love, and you can look at things in a totally different light than you ever thought possible. And then you start realizing what's really important in life and what kind of man you want to be. I told you I went to training with DJ Shipley's company, and he and I got into a deep discussion. And I'm like, I was not proud of the man I was before, but I am now. And I'm like, no matter what uniform we wear, DJ, we're human beings first. We're supposed to feel, but we callous up so much because you can't absorb all this pain.
Yeah, by necessity,
We feel, yeah, exactly. We feel nothing then, and that's not the way we're supposed to live, man. And I'm like, I feel now, and I'm happy, and I look like life is beautiful. Listen, there's going to be it ebbs and flows, and there's going to be some visceral pain that you're going to experience. But you know what? That's life. Experience, you have to feel it to heal. The only way out is through. If you dull it with substances, if you push it away, it's still there. That's what you have to realize. It's gone nowhere. It's still in your psyche.
Yeah.
You have to deal with that shit.
Yeah, you can, we spend our careers, and especially law enforcement, military, and elsewhere, you build up this callous. You build up this tough exterior. You build up this ego of who you're supposed to be, this tough guy. But that, while it can protect you, it's also cutting you off. And the more you cut off your heart from connecting to everything that is around you, the more you start to suffer and suffer. And when you can break that wall down like these medicines do, and you can feel love and emotion, and you'll feel pain again, It's hard. It's not all a cakewalk, but you feel again and you come reconnected, and people can start to see it in you. And it starts to emanate out from you to other people in your life. And it has a profound positive impact on your life if you can continue, to embrace the love that comes from it.
Yeah. I was telling you a story before of my journey when I was listening to Eddie Penny on a Sean Ryan show, and I thought about this 2-year-old found floating in a pool call I had 5 years before. And, I finally dealt with that pain because that was the one call in 30 years that I started crying on. And I told myself, fucking pussy, you can't cry. Because after we transported the baby, I had to stay for 3 hours with the grandparents at the house, and they were responsible for watching the kids, little family get together. And the visceral screams and cries from these poor grandparents who were blaming themselves when they shouldn't have, were tearing me apart. And the best thing I could have done was go behind their bushes and cry like a baby, get it out of my system, and I would have been good, but I couldn't do it. And once I went through this healing journey, I actually sat down. I wrote a 4-page letter to the family, and I told them everything that I had gone through because I felt guilty about saving their baby, even though it was not my guilt to have, because she ended up, essentially what I thought was going to be a vegetable. And she's not. Thank God she's made great progress. She's still has some hurdles to clear, but it was so cathartic for me to write that letter, and I can never profess feelings before, and I wrote down everything I went through, and it was great because her father contacted me, we established contact, but just I would never be able to have done that prior to this healing journey with these psychedelic meds, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry, just one more important thing that I don't think we acknowledge as men. I never really discussed this with guys in my 30-year career, but I'm finding out now most of us have had tumultuous relationships with our fathers growing up. And that's kind of what lit this fire, because what we like to do is not normal. Everyone's running away from trouble. We're running towards it. And we love it. And it's not normal. But something had to light a fire under us. And I think most guys have had this childhood trauma. And I think maybe we became what we became to insulate ourselves from pain, thinking, if we become this formidable guy, then no one can hurt us again. But not realizing it's mental pain that we're not protecting ourselves from, nor can you. And I think guys really have to acknowledge the fact that you're still this little boy inside. I don't care if you're a Team 6 Navy SEAL. You're still that little boy inside in some respects looking for that love. And you know what? It may never come, man, unfortunately. And, my father's deceased. In my journeys, I've asked him why. Why'd you do this? Why'd you treat me like this? And I'm never going to get an answer. I know why. That's the way he was raised. And, my next thing would be like, well, why didn't you break that generational trauma? Either he was not aware or he was too weak. It is what it is. I'm not looking for sympathy, but we need to acknowledge and heal from this, from that pain, because to a man, it is overwhelmingly, I've found to be the case that most of us have not had good relationships. I don't know how we didn't really get too in depth in yours with your father, but.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. There's a theme of childhood trauma that leads people to become very high performers in the military, law enforcement, and elsewhere in the world. That desire to work so hard, and what you're really working for is you just want to be loved. And you think you got to do all this stuff to be loved. You think you got to go through all this hell. You got to become this superhuman in order to be loved. And it totally stems back to a childhood trauma. And I think pretty much every other SEAL I've talked to about this, especially I've gotten to know a lot of those guys. It's in a lot of the SF community. We all have this root of something happened in our childhood that made us not feel loved. And so this whole time we've been building up all this stuff just to get that love. And the thing is that love's been there all along. And when you get to experience some of these indigenous medicines, especially, it shows you that. It shows you that love's been there, and it allows you to forgive, things in your past. It allows you to move forward and understand their perspective and maybe why it was like that. Like you said, what they experienced in their childhood was passed down to you, and that's just the way things have been done, and for generations in our culture. But now we have this chance to heal ourselves and to forgive and to open back up and release all of these pent-up, trapped emotions. And once you get this shit out of you and you break down those walls, you become a force to be reckoned with, and you love yourself. And that emanates out into your life, especially if you got kids and loved ones around you. They get to feel it and see it, and it makes a profound impact. My goal as a father now is to just love the hell out of these little critters, and be the loving, kind father that they deserve. And not to say that my parents weren't loving, but there was certainly, a number of factors that, I think their generations, they dealt with things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. We evolve more, I guess, as a, just a people as time goes on, and we realize what's important, and, the trauma we've been bestowing on others. And, I think one thing, once we heal, we're able to enter into healthy relationships as well. Like you'll see a ton of people who are dependent on outside forces and other people for their inner happiness. And you'll see guys and girls that you're friends with who are in these relationships with these morons, and you're like, what are you doing? Well, you know what? They're compensating for something. Either they feel like they're not good enough to be loved by someone good, their self-esteem is tanked. For whatever reason, they're coming up with these type of guys or girls every relationship because they're not healthy in their thinking. So once you do heal, you make sure that everyone else comes up to your level. You do not go down to their level. And that's a beautiful thing as well.
No doubt, no doubt. Now
So
we
let
get
me
this
ask you.
opportunity. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I get a lot of questions from people who specifically want to know about, journeys with different modalities, and you've journeyed with a few different things. So what would you say, from your perspective, which modality was the most profound healing? Or, if someone came to you and asked you for one, I have to heal and I want to use one modality, I don't have money or whatever the case may be, which would you point them to first and why?
This is very individualized, depending on your situation, depending on what resources you have at your disposal. I would say, there's a lot of different options. The first step, if you're a veteran or law enforcement, first responder, I would look into some of the programs out there that help take guys and go through a whole process with it. There's Heroic Hearts Project. There's Veteran Solutions, No Fallen Heroes.
Yep.
There's getting to be more and more of these veteran nonprofit organizations that provide funding to send people to do the medicine properly with preparation and integration afterward. So that would be the first thing. And now I realize that these programs are like Schindler's List, and it's difficult to get on, and there's often certain requirements. I urge you to, share your story with them, even if you maybe don't meet the requirements for those programs at face value. Try to apply anyways. And then, there's states where it's becoming legal. I think Oregon now is decriminalized psychedelics. Ann Arbor, Michigan, psychedelics have become decriminalized. There are a number of ways you can get involved in clinical research programs that are studying some of these substances. So there are legal routes that you can take. There are fundings that can be received if you pursue them potentially. And I realize that these things are something that you can grow in your backyard too. You can grow your own mushrooms. You can grow and have something that you've grown out of the earth at your own house, and you can research on how to do it properly. I really urge you not to just go out and blindly trust the first person you meet to guide your ceremony, but if you start asking about this stuff, you might be surprised. Maybe you know somebody who's a little bit into this stuff, and you can find routes to do it right. But really, really research it. Really, really kind of dig into this stuff. And don't be the person who just goes out and buys a shit ton of psychedelics, throws them down their own throat, and fucks themselves up even worse. Because that's, you can mess yourself up with this stuff too, especially if you don't integrate afterwards and start to build new habits. You can just reinforce the same angry, pissed off, behaviors or whatever they may be that you had going into it if you don't do it right. So I'm not going to say that there's one specific medicine for everybody out there that is superior. What's calling to you? What are you familiar with? What do you have access to? Personally, the most profound medicine that I've experienced has been iboga. Ayahuasca was also very powerful, but iboga for me really, it's a root. It's a root from this iboga shrub that's from West Africa, and it's been used by the Bwiti in Gabon in particular, and it's a national treasure there. This stuff is part of their community to the point where 7-year-old children initiate into this medicine.
Really?
And similar, like to the Shipibo in South America and Central America, the first time the baby breastfeeds, it's with ayahuasca on the mother's breast, and these people are so connected to nature and present and loving and kind, and it's because they've been introduced to these just eye-opening medicines from such a young age. But if you can get something with Iboga, back to what I was talking about, it really gets down to the root of what your trauma is, which when I went into Iboga, I was fortunately for no Fallen Heroes through Wiz Buckley, who you had on the show. He was kind enough to fund me to go down to Costa Rica to experience that medicine at Awaken Your Soul. And they had just this incredible staff, this incredible ceremonial setting in the jungle, and really quality medicine that was brought in from West Africa and Gabon, that's grown in the jungles, from the dung of elephants. This stuff had deep wisdom in it. And what it did is it brought me back to my earliest memories, like still in my mother's womb, through birth, through very early childhood. And I thought I was going to be dealing with the ejection and the mental hospital trauma that had happened. But at the root of all of this stuff that I still hadn't experienced, even after ayahuasca, there was all this childhood trauma that I had experienced that I had no memory of, all these repressed memories. And I was able to reapproach them from a way that was, I was open to the experience so that I could accept it, forgive, and let it go and move forward. And when those things were healed and I released those trapped emotions from, birth and pre-birth even, I just awoke after the night of ceremony, and I had never felt so much love and gratitude to be alive. And that medicine is also really powerful, Iboga, for healing the nervous system. It can really heal. I have a lot of nerve damage throughout my body. I have, these severe traumatic brain injury issues, and it really puts your mind back into a state where it can regrow. It actually boosts a protein that you have high levels of when you're a toddler, when you're learning everything. And it puts you back basically into this toddler brain state where you can relearn really quickly and physically regrow neural tissue and connections and all these cells in ways that heals your brain and your nervous system in profound ways. So for me, I really think Iboga is an incredible medicine, and I really feel highly about a lot of others, from psilocybin, peyote. There's a place, I think, for ketamine therapy in a clinical setting that's accessible now.
Yep.
You can order a kit online today. It's going to cost you a bit, but you can get that shipped to your house and you can start doing ketamine therapy. Ayahuasca. There's so many of these different medicines, and they all really kind of lead you to the same place in different ways, and they all paint the picture a little bit differently for you to comprehend it. But I'm an advocate for what makes sense to you.
Yeah.
But don't go into it blindly. Don't go into it unprepared. Try to get your body as physically and mentally ready as you can within reason. You don't have to be perfect going into it. Iboga and ibogaine specifically are really good at, if you're having addiction issues with alcohol, drugs, for resetting that addiction center of your body and allowing you to be free of addiction. And I see people going that have been lifelong alcoholics or dealing with, whatever, you name it, drug addiction, and they come out the other side of it and they don't have an urge for any of that anymore because they feel good again. You feel good. You don't need to suppress. Those are all coping mechanisms.
Exactly.
The drugs, the alcohol, the porn, the sex, all the shit we do in life, we're compensating. We're just trying to deal with what is reality in this insane society we're living in right now.
Yeah.
And it's the world that's kind of gone insane. It's not you. And this gives you the opportunity to break free from all that rat race and the matrix, if you want to call it that, and see it for what it is and value what's actually really important.
Absolutely. Great points. And one thing I want to add is that for those of you who are on SSRIs or antidepressants, typically most of these modalities you have to wean yourself off slowly and then be totally off for approximately 30 days prior to, for instance, if it's ayahuasca, drinking, or ibogaine. Psilocybin's a little bit different, but just keep that in mind if you guys are planning on going this route. And one thing that Kegan said about the medicine, You're not sure where it's going to go. He thought it was going to take him one way, and it took him another way. The medicine gives you what you need, not what you want, and that's what you learn about the medicine. It'll take you places. I went there. I was experiencing PTSD, and I remember clear as day. My first journey was as though I was looking at a big screen TV, and most people's sense of female presence, I the same, and they call her Mother Ayahuasca, and Mother Aya was kind of sitting in the corner, and I literally remember throwing up my hands, and I'm like crying, and I'm like, I need help, and I'm like, I need to get rid of this ego, I need to get rid of this anger, this rage, I don't need it anymore, and she was just talking to me in this journey, and she put me at peace. She's like, you used to be this thing, but you're not that anymore. Your time has passed. And because I medically retired and I kind of disappeared, it wasn't like I had a big retirement party or I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to people. And so I thought I was good at first, but as time went on, I wasn't apparently. And that just like put me at peace. And she's like, everything that comes along with it now is down here. And if you ever need to call upon it again, it's there. You'll always be a warrior. But you don't need all that stuff up here, that rage, that anger, that hatred. Yeah. And, man, it was unbelievable. Everything I asked for was, like, granted. I remember looking at the volunteers, and they're there for us. Whatever we need, they're there for. And I'm like, I want to be more empathetic and loving. These people are so graceful. I want to be like that. And it was granted. Like, I came out of that first night such a more empathetic man. It blew my mind what I experienced. And I know for those of you who are watching this right now, a lot of you are pessimistic, don't believe it, don't think it's possible. We're both here to tell you that we've experienced it.
I was there. I remember.
Yeah.
I remember what it's like to be that.
It's inexplicable. But if you journey with these medicines, you will find, if not the same exact thing, very, very similar healing. And I don't know, I always say that once I start talking about it, words dilute the magic, because it is magic.
It is. And it opens your eyes to the fact that magic's all around us, and, despite what we may be conditioned to think. And it's truly miraculous that we're here and the way that we are so interconnected with each other.
Yeah.
And when you can turn all that rage and anger that's been trapped in your heart into just this, I mean, I felt it with ayahuasca. It was just like all that rage and fury. It just felt like my heart was just like this ball of fucking lava, encrusted in just all this armor. And when that exploded out of me, it was like this starlight energy of just freaking love was just bursting out of me and connected me to everything around. And so, those moments, that rage and anger, got us through a lot of shit.
Yep.
But when you can break free of it and transform it into something different, man, it's even more powerful. When you have that same fuel source, only it's been transformed into love energy.
Yeah.
Which I get it. I'm talking about energy and vibrations and magic. This fucking long-haired hippie dude, fuck him. Well, go out and just, see if you can find your own path to these medicines. It's out there. It's growing. There's more and more information out there on how to do this. If you're in a really hard place with detox, I know there's a facility in Sedona that uses ibogaine. Ibogaines are really, there are actually facilities if you're dealing with such a deep addiction that you can't even get yourself to a point where you're healthy enough to do some of these medicines. There are ibogaine facilities out there that will help treat you, while you're still having the strong addictions and using. But the more of that stuff you can get off of and the more healthy you can get yourself through some of this more holistic stuff that I'm talking about right now, just get out for a 10-minute walk in the morning, get some sunlight in your eyes, stop eating all the shit that's on the shelves at the grocery store and stick to the perimeter. Shop at your local farmer's market, drink clean water, put down the soda, cut down the alcohol, cut back the cannabis, cut back whatever pills are popping in your mouth. The more of that you can do in preparation for your journey, the more you're going to get out of the journey itself. And
good, great advice.
And it's a process.
Together, all these little things, and all these little things add up to something drastic.
They do, and it takes time. It takes time, and the real work begins after the medicine journey.
Yeah.
With the integration and rebuilding those habits. There's actually a great book out there by Dr. Joe Dispenza. It's called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. I highly recommend you read that maybe after your medicine journey, but it's talking about the ways that you can reinvent yourself to be whatever you want.
Yep.
But it takes discipline, it takes time, it takes consistent effort. But just like if you show up at the gym, you're a 110 pound scrawny dude, you can barely pick up a 10-pound dumbbell and curl it. Well, if you go every day and you curl that thing and you start lifting and you start listening and learning, in 10 years, you're going to be a freaking beast if
Yep.
you stick with it consistently. And that's what these medicines are a gateway to, only for your entire character, your entire person that is you. It's going to develop you in a way that you are, the spiritual, emotional, physical, mental version, best version of yourself that you've ever been. But it's going to take you to make that decision.
Yep.
No one else can turn that key. Maybe we can help spark it a little today so you know that's in you, but you can be whatever you want to become. It's not going to be easy. You're probably going to have to go through some hell to make that transformation, but you can do it. And you can come out the other side feeling better than you've ever felt, more connected to everything around you, serving your highest purpose that you've ever lived.
Absolutely. Great words. As you're saying, you could transform yourself mentally and physically. You must want to have, you're the one that's going to do it. You have to want to do it. No one's coming to your house, throwing you over the shoulder and taking you to get help. But you raise your hand, I promise you, as Kegan's saying, there are plenty of people and places out there that will do so. So, Kegan, fantastic interview. You brought such insight into so many different things. I guarantee we just change at least one person's life as they watch this. And really, that's all I want to do. That's all I could ask for. And as I say, my guests are ordinary people who've done extraordinary things, as you've done and continue to do in your life. So please tell people how to get in touch with you. Obviously, everything is going to be all the links will be in the bio. But
cool. Yeah. You can check out my website. It's just KeganGill.com. KeganGill, just like my name is displayed down below my face right now, .com. It's got links to a lot of these veteran nonprofit organizations I'm talking about that can maybe help get you access to some of this healing or point you in the right direction. You can also get me on Instagram. I'm at Kegan Smurf Gill on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. And keep an eye out. My book is now available for pre-order on Amazon. It's called Phoenix Revival, The Aftermath of Naval Aviation's Fastest Survived Ejection. And that goes into a lot more detail than we got to cover today about my ejection and recovery and then paths to healing. And it also includes in the back of that book, and the last chapters are all about practical steps that you can take with a little bit more detail than we got to get in today on how you can make these changes yourself. And anybody can do it. You just have to be willing to make those changes.
Excellent. All right, brother. Thank you again. Guys, if you
Thanks,
like,
Mike.
hit the subscribe and like button. And you guys be safe out there. We will definitely see you soon. Take it. Thanks again, brother.